Hi guys, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to everyone who saw my previous video in this challenge. I was so proud of the work I did in that video and you guys clearly seemed to enjoy it, or at least the concept, or something about it, maybe the editing, I don't know. At time of writing this script, I will have gained about 100 subscribers, and I seriously can't believe there's like a small army of people who've come through and said, yeah, I like this, or I want to see more of this. That's fantastic. But I digress. As much as I'd like to sit here and talk about myself, we have a much more important mission. After Mr. Slime 2 had defeated the Wall of Flesh, a whole new army of new opponents came to light, complete with their own abilities, tactics, and ridiculous status effects. Also, just for reference, I now have over 90 hours invested in this character. This was a horrible idea. Please subscribe. Chapter 0, Freaking Out. Now, you have to bear with me on this one. I managed to delete a few of my early sessions post Wall of Flesh, so I'm just going to have to give you a quick recap of what I managed to do. I managed to get all the necessities, like wings, a mithril anvil, and an adamantite forge. Now that we have the crystal ball as well from the Wall of Flesh, we're also able to get the wizard enchantment, which will occupy an entire accessory slot until post Moonlord. Why, you may ask? Because it upgrades any equipped enchantments to their force level effects, which in short just means their power levels increased. I'll make sure to note any important changes when they become relevant. This is a key item to this run, and that'll become much more obvious later. On a side note, I just wanted to mention how inconsistently the Fargo's wiki is with information on these items. Even some of the in-game documentation doesn't make a lot of sense either. One of our first objectives is fighting the Goblin invasion in Hardmode, which now has a new enemy, the Goblin Summoner. They have a couple of drops that will allow us to upgrade our Shadow enchantment into the Ancient Shadow enchantment, which will be a secret tool that will help us later. Wink! I take a small break to build this tree-looking thing for a jungle biome house, but I have these freaky bug guys draining my health through the walls. Not only that, I've built it so tall that a wyvern is able to spawn and tear me in half. I set up a false hallow biome in a jungle valley, setting my palm trees up to fire on the rapidly spawning fairies, unicorns, and gastropods. Getting a stronger source of healing will go a long way in making our future fights possible. A common theme is going to be me leaving my computer on while I'm in the other room waiting for certain drops from enemies. The way that the crafting recipes are designed in Fargo Souls means that there's no real way to accidentally stumble into making most of the enchantments or accessories that we need. I repeat these tree farms in the jungle, underground, and dungeon for the necessary components in the Arc Shield, which should give us a leg up in future engagements. I do one in the underground Hallow for Souls of Light too, but that's just a bad time. While you're inside the Hallow in the underground and caverns layers, you're actually inflicted with a status effect called Flipped. It just flips you upside down like the gravitational potion, but you can't control it, and it's probably the worst effect ever designed in a video game ever. Oh well. In order to even our odds, we also need to get as many buffs as possible. I stated this last time, but for any newbies out there, having 30 of any potion in your inventory, safe, or piggy bank grants you the buff permanently. Even with all these buffs, we still barely stand a chance. We even have to place down a bar statue, heart lanterns, and campfires to maximize regeneration, as another common theme among Eternity bosses is damage over time, and plenty of it. Now that we've strengthened our grip in this world, we're ready to smash a big, silly worm. Chapter 1, The Destroyer. The first boss that appears naturally to maul us is a giant metal worm by the name of the Destroyer. Armed with basically nothing special, our first couple of interactions do not end well. Even with a full set of titanium armor, we still take too much damage and don't deal enough. As far as mech bosses go, this one will definitely be the easiest with what we have available. The Destroyer is quite similar to his vanilla parallel, except he has a few new attacks and also inflicts 2 new status effects, Electrified and Lightning Rod. Electrified causes the player to take damage over time, and even more if they're moving. He also inflicts Lightning Rod, like I said, which essentially just creates a lightning storm to fry your brain completely. As I mentioned before, the only way to get around this gimmick is to actually defeat him and equip the accessory he drops. Interestingly, the Palmwood enchantment comes back in a huge way in being really effective against the Destroyer. The boss is famous for being easy to cheese with piercing attacks, and the area damage the explosions do is no exception. I found that I was getting much closer to defeating him when I set up the arena with 3 palm trees. He certainly does himself no favours in his second phase, as he spins around the player and throws lasers. The trees are able to snipe him, and he even takes much more damage from our Inferno enchantment, as he pretty much just curls up around its radius. He also has a phase where he begins to shoot lasers in random directions. And you might notice this becomes a mainstay for hard mode bosses. They all love a good laser beam. I also had this close-ish fight where King Slime appears and I die. Mind your own business. Damn it! After refining my strategy over many attempts, I found that the best way to lay down consistent damage to him is placing 3 palm trees in a line and guiding the worm towards them. As long as I focus on dodging and my position, the palm trees easily do enough damage. The worm falls, giving us a faint glint of hope in this otherwise hopeless-seeming run. Chapter 2, Mr. Skeleton. Now that the Destroyer is dead, I begin to learn how to approach the Skeletron Prime fight. What I learned is as follows. Skeletron does his usual nonsense, with each one of his arms will flail, lunge and shoot at the player, and are only inactive when Skeletron is spinning and charging. Speaking of, his charge is accompanied by Dungeon Guardians that will attack from all 4 cardinal directions in a wall shape. He also inflicts Nano Injection and Defenseless, both of which will cause you to take a lot more damage, and you can only become immune to them using his Eternity Drop. This attack changes in his next phase, where he will speed up to keep the player close, shooting dark stars in a fan shape and spinning his arms in a circle around him. He will grow new arms and heal his old ones for a total of 8 annoying tendrils going straight for your neck. For the Destroyer, it was easy to set up my palm trees and make him go around them, but Skeletron is way too erratic and we can't afford to use any movement speed accessories as they limit our damage / survivability with a worse return, at this particular stage of equipment anyways. It's easy enough to have a pair of early hard mode wings and do circles around him during some phases, but once you get caught in a cycle of having your defense broken and getting knocked around, it's very hard to escape and recover. I found that during his phase 2 dash, the dark stars are the real killer. In order to maximize our chance to dodge, we have to stay close to the ground and jump over or fall through the platforms when the star's approaching. I found that quite often he actually manages to use this attack while I'm already really far up in the air with no wing time left. So, that's how that goes. In order to gear up, I needed to do a few more optional objectives. One of these was actually fighting the Deviant, who's the weakest of the mutant NPCs and is actually a pre-hard mode boss, so the fight was pretty easy. She drops Deviating Energy, which allows us to create a few different accessories that could potentially be the route for defeating these impossible mechanical bosses. Now that we've defeated the Deviant, we're able to craft the Nakomi enchantment, which has a really neat effect when paired with the Sparkling Adoration that she drops. It allows us to graze attacks and gain energy. We can release this energy as hearts that damage enemies and heal us. With the Nakomi enchantment equipped, a full energy activation causes a giant axe to appear and do insane damage in front of us. Initially, I was worried that the tooltip states that as you get one in your hands and would have to use it, it's kind of against the rules, but as you'll see here, it actually just appears as a normal summon and does its good work without any further input from the player. Our attempts after that become a little bit more successful as the giant axe allows us to skip a big portion of the fight, and the area damage even disables some of the arms if we position well enough or get lucky enough. A new issue has arisen that Skeletron enters a new phase at 0 health. He gains 100 HP and then enters a Dungeon Guardian form, which will always one-shot us.
How do you do it?
An idea I put in motion was placing a teleporter either side of the long platform so I could kite the skull long enough to be chipped away, as he has massively increased defense as well. This seems like it would work, but after a few tries, I realized I just couldn't do enough damage quickly enough. I was actually streaming a session on my Twitch channel at Bug Boyfriend, and I was doing it because, I thought it'd be a better use of my time actually showing it to someone while I'm recording it, whatever. And I had my first viewer join. His name was Derpalor, and he actually had some experience doing this exact challenge, and he recommended that I use the Ancient Shadow enchantment to try and upgrade our burst potential. And here's what happened.
I just did it! No way! He exploded!
Yes, he did indeed explode. In my darkest hour, a kind Twitch viewer came in clutch with a save. With that, we're now faced with what I've been putting off for the longest time, the twins.
Oh, that did it. Oh my god, this build's elite!
Chapter 3. Two Eyes That Are Brothers. Our next quarry is a pair of eyes known as the twins. This boy band consists of two absolute freaks. Firstly, Retinazer, the cool, laser-wielding older twin, and Spasmatism, the less cool but still cool, cursed flame-breathing younger twin. They behave as normal for their first phase, but become super evil and mean in their second phase. Retinazer now has, you guessed it, a giant beam attack. He will spin in a circle after telegraphing his attack briefly. Spasmatism begins dashing around as normal, but also breathing cursed flames at the same time. When Retinazer does his beam attack, he will also launch fallen stars in a similar pattern with his brother. With these bosses, we again run into a small issue of mobility versus damage output. Retinazer's beams are easy enough to dodge with only a pair of wings, but Spasmatism requires more speed or fine-tuned movement. With our current setup, taking damage is almost inevitable. so we need to finish the fight as soon as possible, especially once they're in their second phase. Therefore, we cannot afford to lose any of our damaging accessories. I quickly find that my opportunity for decent damage and relative safety comes during the laser spin. I can easily stay close to the twins and spam palm trees where they lay. It also turned out that I could use the Queen Slime mount to maximise my vertical movement to avoid Spasmatism's flame dash. We managed to bring them down, and somehow I managed to hit her with the mount for the final blow. I'm realising now that I did damage using the mount. I'm not crazy about it, but I'm pretty sure it still fits within these loosey-goosey rules I've created for the run. As long as it's not a weapon, I'm totally fine with it. In any case, we craft the mechanical boss's Eternity accessory called the Dubious Circuitry and move towards the next big bad, Plantera. Chapter 4. A Plant. After struggling through some of my least favourite bosses in Vanilla Terraria, I was so worried about what kind of changes Plantera was going to have to make him nigh impossible, but I guess we'll discuss that soon. We begin by carving out an arena in the underground jungle, which I managed to forget that I can make the tool necessary to mine chlorified ore, and I just decide to play around it, which of course gets me killed. After crafting a pickaxe axe, I advance towards getting chlorified bars, which will allow me to make turtle armor and become an absolute tank. I also find life fruit and slowly build up an extra 100 health, which is so juicy, yummy, awesome to me. I also craft the chlorified enchantment, which gives us back our spore jump and a leaf crystal sentry that actually does really good damage. I clean up my arena and get back to work. Plantera has a couple of new abilities but is unchanged for the most part. She shoots leaf crystal projectiles similar to the chlorified enchantment and also summons these pink crystals that explode, dealing some annoying damage. At half health, she begins the next phase and summons a ton of little green grabbers. Not their actual name, but actually how I came to know them as. He also shoots out a fan of these grabbers, dealing insane contact damage to half of your arena. All you've got to do is hope that you've managed to position yourself in a favourable spot for when this attack comes out. After shying away inside my turtle armor towards the end of the fight to avoid taking too much damage, my palm trees manage to clean her up and we get the temple key. I suppose it's time to go see the golem. Chapter 5. A real life statue. Golem lives in the temple down in the depths of the jungle underground. Unfortunately, a large part of the temple actually exists inside the Hallow Underground, so that means I'm again gonna get a debuff called Flipped. Now, as I said before, it's super annoying to have the screen flipped, and now that's paired with the really powerful denizens of the temple. Also, jungle mimics appear way too often here, and they just slaughter me. For most boss fights so far, I've had the distinct pleasure of being able to respawn and re-enter the fight almost immediately, but the temple's a completely different story. I can't even break through the walls to the boss chamber, and I can't use actuators from the outside due to the temple curse. But I can't help but die almost every time I try and get through. After finally making it to the internal chamber, I realise that I'm actually given the ability to use wires. So I go home and get some actuators, wires, pressure plates, etc. and come back. I carve out a way in, and I place heart statues on the ground and smooth out the floor. I should say, Golem is usually easy in vanilla. You can abuse platforms to stay out of his reach for most of the fight. However, in Eternity mode, we aren't allowed on platforms or to use grappling hooks thanks to the debuff called Low Ground. This makes things tricky, but thankfully we still have the mobility our wings provide, and this should be enough for the fight. I also want to say, Golem now looks like Sam's Undertale? Everyone's favourite skeleton time traveller, Undertale, you heard of it maybe? He also has a couple of new attacks to help spice up an otherwise easy boss. He has a stomp attack that drops boulders all over the joint. His attacks now apply 3 different kind of armor debuffs, and his cool skeleton head also has his own slew of attacks. He's got this beam and spiky ball explosion, and like an Undertale-ish themed wall bone attack, which reminds me so much of Undertale. I literally thought I could stand still and it wouldn't deal damage to me. Only real gamers get this. I make some imbuement flasks so that my trees can inflict ichor, which actually works to my surprise. Given how small the arena is, the palm trees are a mainstay to use against the golem. He actually regenerates like 180 health per second, so we can't afford to not do enough damage or have the fight drag on too long. I try shuffling around my enchantments and accessories. There's still a few hard mode accessories to get, but a few of the ones I was interested in actually require defeating the Pumpkin Moon, which is really hard for our build as it is now. It wouldn't be so hard, but Eternity mode changes the system so that when you die, the wave number actually regresses by 1, and none of the boss drops actually come until wave 13. So, you know, we can try, but it becomes morning too soon. Also, a little side note, I try making a little cactus house, but I actually ran out of cactus for the walls. On our successful run, we end up with a build featuring the Plantera Eternity item called the Magical Bulb, which gives us a Plantera friend to shoot and spawn pink flower bombs. He also has the passive bonus of providing life regen, which is awesome and broken and amazing. I love it. I stay nice and close and allow the chlorophyte enchantment spores to do as much damage as they can, and simultaneously I'm keeping an eye on the golem head to avoid his powerful attacks. And just like that, we smash the golem. I'm not wild about this Eternity accessory, so I don't incorporate it into the build just yet, but you'll see more of it later. Onward to the Lunatic Cultist. Chapter 6, Rampant Evangelist. We are now able to craft beetle armor to maximize our armor for the fight ahead. It provides a massive temporary defense buff and will allow us to take a bit more of a beating before we perish. I also defeat the Eternity mode boss named Lifelight. He is super easy and isn't really worth the effort editing and explaining how that went. So, you know, you can enjoy this clip here. Now, the Lunatic Cultist was a cool fight. Eternity mode really turns up the spectacle. There are more clones, more dragons, and more visions than ever before. He summons pillars and launches them straight at our face, dealing silly stupid damage and making a hell of a mess. During his fight, he will create summoning circles around the player, requiring us to attack the correct cultist, otherwise they summon both the Phantasmal Dragon and an Ancient Vision. The problem is that we don't actually have a way to reliably select which cultist is the right one. I have some attacks that I can control, like the drone lasers from Dubious Circuitry, but they don't appear to count. The only thing I could get to work was the Spore Jump from the Chlorified enchantment, but it would quite often hit the wrong one, resulting in a sweet frickin' dragon tearing our lungs out. So, I geared up with some post-golem equipment, notably the Dark Artist enchantment. This allows us to spawn a Flame Burst minion after holding down left mouse button for a little while. These guys deal insane damage, and we can stack with a few other enchantments to great effect. I worked towards crafting a hybrid accessory called the Lump of Flesh, which gives us a few massive bonuses, as you can see here on screen, but it also gives us a notable ability to fire a massive laser after charging for a while, and actually gives us the immunity to Frozen, which is a really annoying aspect of the fight, I found out. I also make the Bionomic Cluster, whose abilities are varied but super useful, so I keep it around. One aspect I really like is the automatic use of potions. That's easily one of my most favourite things. It also has a dumb shadow attack that slows us down to a crawl that makes it nigh unusable if you have it equipped. I figure a way that you can actually turn this off in the settings, the accessory settings for Fargos, but I don't figure that out just yet. I raised my odds of winning by bringing in some of my heart statues from the temple arena, because I was just not able to live long enough to win. After smashing my head against this fight for long enough, I managed to take him down with a small beam from my Lump of Flesh accessory. Now, something I didn't know that was actually in this mod, but our lunatic cultist will drop an item called the Mutant's Pact, which gives us a whole additional accessory slot, which is massive for us because that's all we have. Now that we've defeated the cultist, it's now time to take 4 big pillar guys down. Chapter 7. 1 easy pillar, and 3 harder ones. Now, I don't think I've hated the pillar fight as much as I did during this run. The Stardust pillar spawned closest to my house, so I engaged with them first. It was easy enough, though I did die a few times because I wasn't really taking it seriously. I was still kind of really hype after the lunatic cultist fight. I took down all the minions so the shield was gone, and I just let my palm trees wail on the pillar until I died, dropping yummy Stardust fragments that we can't actually do anything with just yet. We can't make a weapon or anything. Now, something very interesting about the pillars is that they each represent one class of damage in this game. Usually this is seen as when you craft the items, but Eternity mode actually changes it so that they're only vulnerable to that kind of damage too. The Stardust pillar is vulnerable to minion damage, which I didn't really know this, but it's almost exclusively what my enchantments and accessories do by default. So when I head over to the Nebula pillar, I find out the hard way that my build was heavily favoured towards having all my friends do all the work. So the kicker is, each pillar from now on will inflict a debuff called Anti-Social, which despawns all minions and doesn't allow you to spawn any until the buff clears. So even if any of my friends did do magic damage for the Nebula pillar, they simply aren't allowed to exist inside its zone. So this posed a massive problem that we had to overcome to even have a chance with the big man Moonlord. My first thought was that I could use a collection of enchantments and accessories that cause a damaging aura. So the first thing that comes to mind was the Molten Enchantment. He's returning because it does a nice damage over time that actually I don't think does class specific damage. I couldn't find anything on it, or I haven't really looked all that hard, but you know. I also have equipped the Ebonwood Enchantment, which can inflict a Shadow Flame damage, and I don't think that's class specific either. I'm pretty sure it's not. I find that even with some decent damage, I'm still taking insane damage from the minions, and I can't reposition properly because the Nebula pillar inflicts this gravity debuff that makes us unable to go up or down, causing us death so many times. I try a new strategy with the Nebula pillar, equipped with the Supreme Deathbringer Fairy, which has a few neat benefits, but the only one we can really make use of inside the no minion zone is the scythes that shoot out while I'm moving. Since they count as magic damage, I can use it to even the odds against the purple pillar. Surely enough, after a lot of circling, I finally managed to break through and gain some yummy Nebula fragments. Next, I try to do the Vortex pillar, but I'm stuck in a very similar situation. I'm struggling to do enough damage to break the shield, which resets when you quit out, which I found out because I'm actually a real human with a real life that I just can't ignore forever. However, I push through anyways. The Vortex only taking damage from ranged attacks is a real non-starter for us, so my tactic was to just fly around, evading the minions' attacks, and briefly grazing the pillar to deal minute damage over time. It's not perfect, but with a few attempts, I managed to whittle him down and move on to the next. I didn't really know what to expect from the solar pillar, but my first attempts ended all with the same word, Crawltipede. Something I didn't figure out for a while was that the Crawltipede will aggro when the player is away from the ground. I was worried because my DPS wasn't high enough to take care of these creepy crawlies, but after accidentally landing on the surface, I realized what I had to do. I carved out a small area next to the pillar, sitting close to him so that the Inferno and Ebonwood enchantments could chip away at it slowly. It really slowly shoots out small flame balls, but they're easy enough to dodge, and I also used the Turtle enchantment to soak up some of the less dodgeable ones. After a little while, the solar pillar falls. Now comes the greatest challenge of my career yet, the Moonlord. Chapter 8. Moonman and his nasty beams. Given that he spawns once naturally after the defeat of all the Celestial Pillars, I thought it would be a good time to try and see where we stand in terms of a power difference right now. The big man spawns in, and it's an absolute nightmare. If I thought the pillar's damage immunity was annoying, the Moonlord also has a similar power. He cycles through the 4 Celestial types, and then what I like to call the Moon phase. He always starts in the solar phase, moving through each after a small amount of time. He will shoot glowing eyeballs occasionally at the player, bleeding their target. He will also shoot slightly homing spreads of projectiles and bullet rains as well. He also has a giant laser, of course, every 2 activations of the leading eyeballs that will either go clockwise or counterclockwise depending on the player's location. Each of the celestial phases has unique attacks alongside their particular immunities. Solar phase shoots fireballs in a fan pattern, the vortex phase summons 6 lightning bolts to hit the player, the nebula phase spawns a distortion field that damages the player, and the stardust phase summons bursts of homing projectiles. Any observant viewers might hear this and ask, so it's going to be exactly like the pillars but way worse? Yes! A million times yes! Jesus. If we take stock of what our potential damage outputs are, they mostly come up minion. Thankfully, the palm tree enchantment has a melee damage component we can use, and classless damage still works the same as it always has. We can also get another source of melee damage from the Chalice of the Moon, which we received for defeating all post-mech bosses and the pillars. This allows us to shoot a burst of fireballs that actually deal melee damage. I know this might be pushing the bounds of the rules, but I'm ensuring that the weapon I'm using to summon these projectiles is only a copper short sword, so even if it does manage to connect, it's not going to actually meaningfully contribute to the fight. So that sorts it. We're going to beeline melee damage at the start with our Chalice and the palm trees, survive the vortex and nebula phases, finally whipping out all of our powerful minions to smash him in the stardust and moon phases. Sounds like an easy plan, no? This allows us to push a little further into phase 2. He will still cycle through celestial aspects as normal, but now we have 3 true Eyes of Cthulhu all firing their own projectiles and big laser beams. Moonlord also beefs up his attacks, summoning giant suns exploding into a cross shape for solar, shooting massive lightning cones down for vortex, littering the battlefield with purple energies for nebula, and shooting huge laser beams in 4 different directions for the stardust. He also has a moon attack that limits our movement during his moon phase by, spinning moons around. They deal mean damage. Since we literally cannot squeeze any more damage out of our poor enchantments, I decide to begin investing heavily in health regen. Now, the Valhalla Knight set that the bartender sells grants a massive boost to health regen, and the enchantment of the same name also boosts all healing received by 33%. We can push this even further with the Wizard enchantment to a nice 50% bonus healing. I also equip the Charm of Myths, which will cut down our potion cooldown to 45 seconds. I know it's not the most exciting accessory for a run like this, but it was integral to pushing through to the insane damage of this fight. I'm just going to let the final fight play out so you can appreciate how hard this fight was for me. And just like that, we have cleared Moonlord. Chapter 9. The plan moving forward. In terms of Fargo's Souls progression, we've literally just started. All of our enchantments we've collected along the way can be combined into forces. They can be combined into a soul. However, this concludes the video. The bulk of the Fargo's content happens post Moonlord, so there's still plenty yet to do, but I just wanted to get this video done and dusted. That being said, I will finish this run, but from here on, I'm going to try streaming my attempts so I can kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I haven't yet decided on the time and place for this to happen, but please stay tuned if this is something you're interested in. This project has been a massive undertaking, but it's my first creative project in a long time that has been this fulfilling and this fun. I'm also learning a lot about editing and YouTube and that sort of thing in general. I can't thank you guys enough for taking a chance, subscribing to me, even though I literally only had a single video on my page. And it's probably some of the weirdest and least consistent editing you've ever seen, but it really makes me feel as if it was well worth the effort. I'll have plenty more to come, so please stay tuned, and if you have any cool challenge run suggestions, please put them below. I love you all, and good night.